Excellent. All right, well, welcome everyone. I'm so glad that everyone's here. I don't normally do this, but I am gonna read through some comments because we have a lot of folks that don't typically come to these meetings. First of all, I'm Gretchen Young. I'm the Deputy Director for Public Works in Rochester and the Chair of MAM. And I have been very privileged to be the Chair of MAM for a couple of years now. So today we do have some new or less frequent attendees. So I'm going to give a little background about why we're here. Folks know the Great Bay total nitrogen permit was approved for 12 New Hampshire communities in November of 2020 and took effect in 2021. The general permit is unique by design in that it allows for regulated communities to opt in to an adaptive management approach to nitrogen reduction. The adaptive management approach is intended to help all parties, the communities, the regulators, and the stakeholders, better understand the water quality challenges of the estuary through data gathering and analysis, implementing and documenting non-point source nitrogen reduction efforts, and charting a course to efficiently and effectively improve water quality in the Great Bay estuary. To effectuate the collaboration that was envisioned by this adaptive management approach, 8 of the 12 regulated communities have joined together to form the Municipal Alliance for Adaptive Management, or MAM. Those 8 communities include Rochester, Portsmouth, Dover, Exeter, Epping, Newington, Rollinsford, and Milton. Recently, the Maine DEP has implemented a very similar permit to our nitrogen general permit. And at the encouragement of the regulators and stakeholders, those communities have also joined MAM. So far, Berwick and South Berwick have joined, and I believe Kittery is going to join once their permit is final. So for those of you less familiar with the general permit, which I don't think there's many, but quickly there's 5 primary focuses for adaptive management, including the monitoring and ambient water quality, tracking the reduction and addition of nitrogen, planning and implementing point source and non-point source reductions. We're focusing on non-point source reductions, providing a collaborative and transparent process for evaluating pollutant loading and the contributing stressors, and ultimately developing a timeline and plan to work towards a TMDL or advanced restoration plan for water quality in the Great Bay. Over the last 5 years, MAM has done some incredible things, which we will get more into as we go through the agenda. But a quick recap is MAM has raised and secured approximately $2.8 million for monitoring and water quality research. MAM has sponsored and promoted the PTAP program to track nutrient reductions or nitrogen reductions in the Great Bay area. That PTAP program, while paid for and sponsored by MAM, is available to all New Hampshire communities and recently is made available to Maine at zero cost to those communities and those participants. Annually, we have prepared and submitted an updated adaptive management plan for the EPA and all stakeholders to see and comment on. And perhaps most importantly, we have created a space for ultimate transparent collaboration, stakeholder and regulator participation, and just general discussion. We are at the end of this first 5-year permit term and are taking the opportunity today to bring all of the participants, stakeholders, regulated communities, and other interested parties together to discuss the work done and plans and goals moving forward. I say this a lot. This is a technical meeting, so while we always open it up to everyone, community members, residents, business owners, there is technical jargon. So if you have questions, please chime in or just recognize that that's kind of the nature of this meeting. Typically we go around and I call on everyone for introductions, but because there are so many people and a number of folks that I don't know, I'm gonna do introductions by group. And I just ask that you either raise your hand or speak when you get to your group. And if you're a consultant or a legal representation for a specific community, just go ahead and speak during that community and along with the rest of the municipal staff. So getting started, we'll go through the MAM participating communities. These are the regulated communities, and I'm going to start with the New Hampshire folks, and then we'll bring in some of the Maine folks. First, I'm, as I said, Gretchen Young from the city of Rochester, and then Portsmouth.
Suzanne Woodland, Regulatory Counsel for the City of Portsmouth. And with us today is Jamie McCarty, who's our GIS and stormwater guru, helping with the remote today.
All right, Dover, City of Dover.
Yeah, I'll lead off. I'm John Storr, Director of Community Services, which is Public Works. So we have stormwater and sewer under our purview. We have with us our environmental project manager, Tim Poles, who I say is a graduate of Jamie Houle in the UNH Stormwater Center. Very happy to have him. Also trying to recruit other people here today. We may have, I don't know if our city attorney, Josh White, is participating remotely. I don't know, Gretchen, if you can see him. Tim is our voting member for Dover, but I've been engaged from the get-go for like 10 years.
Great, thank you. Town of Exeter.
Steve Cronin, Public Works Director for the Town of Exeter. It's just me here today.
Great. Epping.
Jake Roger, Town Administrator. I'm the only one here.
Great, thanks, Jake. Anyone from Newington? I believe, yeah, Ariel's coming. Unfortunately, Jamie McCarty, I just have to give you the heads up. The way that it's set up to keep it pinned on us seeing the large room, I can't see if people are raising their hands. I only see a handful of people. So if somebody's raising their hand, you'll have to let me know.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I can. You should be able. Yeah, there's the participants window. I'll keep an eye on it for you.
Yeah, I think if I start messing around with stuff, I'm gonna might end the meeting. Okay, Rollinsford. Okay, and anyone from Milton?
Richard Kraus, Town Administrator.
Great, thanks. Okay, now we'll do the MAM participating communities from Maine. So South Berwick.
Town Domestic, South Berwick Administrator.
Do you have any other folks with you today? I don't know. I didn't know if there was anyone else remote from South Berwick. Berwick. And Kittery. Anyone from Kittery? Okay. Then I'll go into our MAM project partners. So I'm going to start with our consultants, Brown and Caldwell. So I see Clifton there.
Clifton Mell, environmental scientist with Brown and Caldwell and consultant at MAM.
Is Stacy there today?
Hi, Stacy Villanueva, Brown Caldwell, environmental scientist.
Great, thank you. And then moving on to the prep team.
Hi, everybody. Colin Masso from PREP, which is Scottish Region Estuaries Partnership. And with me today is Chris Whitney, our program scientist.
Great. Then the UNH Stormwater Center.
Yeah, I'm Jamie Houle from the UNH Stormwater Center, also with the University of Hampshire.
Great. And then I put NHDES in as our project partners because you guys have been great partners.
Steve Kuchar, Coastal Program Administrator, Department of Environmental Services.
Ted Deers, Assistant Director of Water Division. First time I've ever been at Great Bay or done anything related to Great Bay.
Yeah.
So
So
it was really
welcome.
good to sort of get a little introduction to it. Appreciate it.
And then it may be wishful thinking, but I'm going to open up the RPCs. So Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen Ziz. I'm Executive Director at the Stratford Regional Planning Commission. And I think Kyle Pimentel is on Zoom, but I'm not sure because I can't see. If he is, Kyle is our Assistant Director and heads up our land use and environment programs.
Great.
Jen Rowden with Rockingham Planning Commission.
Great, thanks, Jen. Okay, then moving on to our stakeholders. So Conservation Law Foundation.
Yeah, Melissa Quinley, the Great Bay Piscataqua Waterkeeper. And my colleague.
Tom Irwin, I direct the New Hampshire office of CLF.
Great. And do we have anyone from TNC, the Nature Conservancy here?
Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
This is Kelsey Meyer Rust. I'm the Coastal Conservation Coordinator at the Nature Conservancy.
Great, thank you. Okay, then some of the other regulated communities, which are our stakeholders. So I know Newmarket.
Sean Gregg, Town of Newmarket. I'm the Environmental Services Director. With me is Lindsay Butler, who is the Town Engineer. And online, maybe Mike Curry, who represents us, who's doing a lot of wastewater work for us.
Great. Let's see, was Summersworth.
Yeah, Mike Babinski, City of Summersworth, Public Works Director.
And Amber Hall, City Engineer with the City of Summersworth, also here.
Great, thank you guys. And then was it Newfields?
Yep, Josh.
Hi. Oh, great. I'm so glad you made it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
I'm
you.
the only one here today, but
Great, thank you.
absolutely.
Okay, and then I will turn it over to our EPA folks.
Yeah, hi, I was over doing Mark Sanborn. I'm the Region 1 EPA Regional Administrator.
I'm Ken Moraff, Director of Water Programs at EPA Region 1. And I think we have a couple people on the line. Daniel Gato and Michael Kyle from the current program.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon.
Yep, hi, I'm here too.
All right, great. Well, thank you, everyone. This is an excellent turnout, and we'll get right into the agenda. So our first item is to talk about some of the monitoring and research that we've been doing, and we're going to ask our consultants to from Brown and Caldwell to give an update, and I'm sure the folks from PREP may have some comments that they would like to join. Now I'm going to have to make sure I can you share your screen, Clifton?
No.
Or you? Yeah.
We don't have the share screen option, and we do have slides.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I'm gonna have to figure out how to.
Hold on, I can make that happen. Give me one.
You can promote them.
What I think I need to do is unpin, and I can't see it. I'm gonna have to unpin so that we're not just looking at ourselves. Sorry, guys. Technology is the hardest part. Here we go. Okay. So, Clifton, if you share.
So Stacy's going to be sharing.
Oh,
Okay.
all right. Let me add Stacy to. There you go.
So Jamie McCarty had the audacity to take a week off, and consequently I had someone else on staff set up the Zoom, and they set it up a little differently. So pardon the slight difference in our approach, and kind of need to kind of work things around a little bit.
One more time.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
I'm just confused why Jamie Poole's on.
Because
He's going to present.
Oh.
Stacy, you should be able to share your screen now.
Okay, it's asking me to send you a request, so I'm doing that.
Okay.
You see it?
I can.
Oh.
You know.
You have to hit allow?
I'm gonna try. Let's see.
We had an international pandemic. We'd all be here.
All right, hold on.
Good luck.
I will be right back.
All right, sorry.
There we go. Something's happening.
Okay,
There we
great,
are.
excellent.
All right, Stacy, we can see it here now.
Great. And let me just get my windows so I can see you. All right. And you can hear me, right?
Yes, thanks.
So as Gretchen said, we're going to give a little bit of an overview of the monitoring and research progress to date and talk about the reporting that is anticipated for later this year on the success and progress during the first permit term. Briefly, we're going to go over those monitoring activities, talk a little bit about pollutant reduction, and then the details of the report, its background, and some initial insights into trends. Then we'll talk about next steps and have some discussion. Okay, so again, we're kind of looking at everything this year in terms of how it's going to inform this synthesis report for the first permit term. And this is a review of a lot of the work that PREP has been doing and UNH that MAM has contributed funding towards. There are a lot of ongoing research programs that MAM has been funding since 2021. And those include like estuarine water quality, the Tier 1 and Tier 2 seagrass programs, and a new program that's got some light arrays out there for some good light data in the seagrass beds. And then a few special reports and studies, biooptical modeling, some synthesis reports, and then some special studies on things like storm inputs and non-structural BMPs. In addition to all of those things that MAM has been funding and contributing to, there's also a lot of other data out there that PREP and UNH and others have been gathering that is pertinent to the synthesis report, including the Tier 3 eelgrass monitoring, some other water quality monitoring programs in the tributary and other places, some meteorological data. And then we're also relying a lot on the reports and studies that have been coming out, like the State of the Estuaries report and the Eelgrass Resilience Project reports, and then some other smaller reports like crab abundance studies that have been happening. So this is what we're pulling all together to move forward. And we basically have what's been collected from the first permit term. This is just a small listing of some of the things that are still pending from that first group of studies, that first permit term group of studies. We're working with PREP. PREP is currently getting these prepared. So it's a little bit of the more recent studies that there's a little bit of a lag in the reporting because there's lab samples and analysis that needs to be done. So some of these things we will be, as soon as we get them, we will be sort of incorporating as well. And as I said, PREP seems to be on track to get those to us in the next couple of months. And the 2025 data, according to the co-ops, is it typically takes a few months after the field season. So they have reporting deadlines by May of the following year for most of those studies. So we expect to get those soon, and it will be all available to synthesize and put into the report. For 2026, moving forward, MAM is going to continue to fund some of the long-term monitoring programs, the Tier 1 eelgrass, estuarine water quality, the light array program, and the Tier 2 seagrass monitoring, as well as the next phase of the Great Bay specific biooptical model that has been ongoing for a few years. And this year's work is going to focus on a site-specific light attenuation model. And then they also have contributed funding towards PREP's external advisor team. These are 3 advisors from different universities. I guess Jen is formerly from NOAA, who provide input on study design, how to interpret results, and sort of give a big picture view on the progress and plans. In addition to all of the study funding, I just wanted to highlight a couple of the other things that MAM is doing and has done. This number for the research and monitoring was as of 2025. So like Gretchen said, it is now over $2 million that has been funded for research and monitoring programs. In addition, there have been grants secured, which have funded oyster and eelgrass health studies and restoration studies. They have been participating as much as possible in RMC and TAC activity prep when those are available for
Yeah,
participation.
hey, hold up just really quick. I think somebody maybe has their speaker on and it's causing some. There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, so they've been participating in PrEP's advisory committees as needed. There is a CLF stakeholder committee and participation in the Eelgrass Resilience Project PAC. In addition, they have been preparing annual updates to the adaptive management plan and been holding public meetings, which discuss progress and plans. Okay, so now that's sort of the big picture of what's been going on. I'm going to give just a quick summary of some of the progress towards pollutant loading reduction that's been happening. And then, like I said, Clifton's going to take over for me and he's going to go into the contents of the report and initial insights. So one of the things we've been doing is trying to get a handle on the actual reductions that have been happening. This is just sort of a graphic with some steps that we've been doing where we're pulling data from ECHO and from other public sources and from the communities themselves to estimate the loads that have been delivered to the bay using the delivery factors and the concentrations that are being reported. One of the things we want to mention is I'm going to show all of the communities that go to Great Bay just in our summary here. For the main communities, there was a bit of estimation because they have not been reporting the same, they've not been required to report the same information that the MAM communities have had to. So we've got some estimates at this point, and those will continue to improve as their reporting changes and as we sort of involve more with the main communities. So I just want to give you a little bit of a preamble that these are sort of preliminary and estimated values. One of the other things that needs to be taken into account when we're looking at loading and how we think about loading to Great Bay is the delivery factor of the load to the bay from each facility. What we're going to show you here today is based on what the delivery factors that are in the permit fact sheet. But it's important to keep in mind that when you're comparing the values that you see from different sources, that they may be using different delivery factors when we're talking about total loading to Great Bay. For example, the State of the Estuary report, they have very different loading estimates for how much nitrogen from that facility gets to Great Bay. And so that means their values are a little bit different. That's just something to keep in mind and probably something that we need to think a little bit more deeply about moving forward. They're very different. And most of these are, many of these are the ones that are at the terminal end of the estuary. So the amount of nitrogen that goes in can be very low or very high, depending on who you ask. And here is a big picture estimate. We went back a little bit before the permit term because we wanted to capture a time frame from before some of the big upgrades have been happening. So this is still recent history, but pre-permit development time period. So the gray bars are 2003 to 2008 delivered load to the bay, to the estuary, using those delivery factors from the permit fact sheet. And then the green bars are 2021 to 2025. So essentially the permit term. And you can see here that there are just very large load reductions across the board. And there have been some significant movements from the communities to upgrade their facilities and really decrease what's been going to the estuary from their water treatment plants. There's also been a lot of work on non-point source reduction. There are very long lists of non-point source reduction projects, and I'm not going to bore you with very long lists. Every year, the MAM communities, when they do their AMP update, they are putting in a list of projects that are working towards reduction of nitrogen from non-point sources. And this is just sort of a little bit of a tasting menu of the kinds of things that the communities are doing. Things from very large infrastructure updates down to smaller things like rain gardens and some bioswales and stretches of impervious pavement. All of these are reducing non-point source nitrogen, as well as things like other toxics and solids, just suspended solids. So multiple benefits from these non-point source projects. And just sort of a little bit of a summary. Again, we have had many upgrades to the treatment plants that have contributed large reductions in nitrogen loading. We're still working on pinpointing the actual estimated reduction compared to those permit limits, but we've got somewhere in the ballpark of about 100,000 pounds per year. And the point sources are, as of last September in the last report, at about 20. So 21,000. These are large reductions and moving forward every year. And as Gretchen said, the PTAP tracking of that has been really successful to see what has been done and what kind of gains they're getting. And I think now is when Clifton's going to take over and talk a little bit more about the report. I can stop and take questions if anybody has any questions about this bit.
Okay, you can, any questions for Stacy? Okay, we'll turn it over to Clifton.
Thank you, Stacy. So I'm going to pick up and talk about some of our activities for this year in particular, looking ahead, starting with a final report. And this is a report that is voluntary. It's this option is mentioned in the context of the adaptive management plan in the permit, but also in the joint adaptive management plan itself. MAM expressed the intention to write a report that puts a cap on the permit term, what's been accomplished over that period, how it's affected our technical understanding of particularly eelgrass, but water quality in general in the Great Bay, and also look ahead to the future in terms of what this might mean in terms of future planning activities. So the report itself is not as important as the research that's been done, that's gone into the report, and hopefully the thinking or the consensus and that it represents, and how that might guide us in the future. So we hope this will be a useful contribution. The objectives summarized here are, summarize what's been accomplished, recap what we've learned about the receiving the water, and look to the future in terms of future permitting phases. So next slide, please. This slide has a lot of words on it, and it is intended to convey basically the outline of the report. But for our purposes today, if we perhaps just look at the top row, these major section headings. Of course, it'll have an introduction. Section 2 will focus on MAM activities and accomplishments, including pollution reduction, the support of research and monitoring, and other types of coordination communication activities. Section 3 is a science-heavy section with a focus on updating our conceptual model of stressor response, particularly with eelgrass, stressor by stressor, but ultimately pointing towards the overall summary. What does this mean in terms of the role of nitrogen and other stressors as well? Section 4 is also a technical section, but focused on total nitrogen thresholds, and this is coming out of a lot of the discussions that led up to the existing general permit about the potential use of load-based or concentration-based nitrogen thresholds to manage the system. So this is meant to say, well, what have we learned with the research that's been done in the last 5 or 6 years? How might that update our understanding? And then 5 is the look ahead. Recommendations on, say, next research phases, types of implementation to emphasize and planning approaches moving forward. Next slide, please. So this report is certainly not a starting from ground zero or either MAM or Brown and Caldwell working independently to come up with something just on our own. This is building on a lot of work that's gone before. This visual here is just a conceptual model of eelgrass stressors from the PREP Integrated Research and Monitoring Plan, or RAMP. So a lot have been work done even before the permit term, but we're always learning more. It's never been difficult to come up with a long list of stressors in this system. It's more their relative impact that has been the question, and that's what we hope to be able to say something more than we could 5 or 6 years ago. Next slide, please. And certainly working in partners and working, having this, be affected by ongoing dialogues with PREP, with the external research advisors. But here's just some examples of some of the research that's been done, and I think many of you are familiar with it. But one example is the Eelgrass Resiliency Project, which was a really close look at conditions in the Great Bay and Portsmouth Harbor over a specific period, 2001 to 2003, with some special types of monitoring above and beyond the types of the tier 1, tier 2, including measurements of eelgrass condition, monitoring across transects across eelgrass meadows, a lot of water quality monitoring, monitoring epiphytes, hydrodynamic modeling. Next slide, please. And this has made some important contributions. It's confirmed a challenging light environment in Great Bay, which is not a surprise. But it really highlighted we had some very wet conditions during these years, and so really saw the impact. In fact, I think this study is really a picture of what the system in its current state, how it responds, to very wet periods. The modeling has provided a lot of interesting insights on the importance of shear stress, and refined our picture of residence times in different parts of the system. And there are also statistics in the report looking at eelgrass water quality interactions, with the caveat that during this period there wasn't necessarily a lot of high density eelgrass, and so those interactions are less than they otherwise would be, if you had higher density eelgrass. Next slide, please. The biooptical modeling, Stacy also mentioned it, but MAM is funding this work and is really excited about what a useful tool this might be. And if you're not familiar with this, essentially what it's doing is it's a model based in optical physics. It takes some of the variables, optical variables that we can monitor with remote sensing, and is able to predict the light absorption in the system by different components, by phytoplankton, by CDOM, by non-algal particulates. And the ongoing phase is to go beyond just absorption, but actually estimate light attenuation, KD, which is often considered the most useful variable for measuring or managing light in these systems. So this is being led by Atsuki Matsuoka out of UNH. Next slide, please. And in the reporting that's been done so far, you can generate this kind of output, which may be a little small and blurry on the screen, but essentially you can look at different locations, different periods, or even different wavelengths of light, and say this is how that light absorption is partitioned among different constituents. And you see for certain periods of time where CDOM is extremely important, and so are non-algal particulates. At higher wavelengths, CDOM is less important. Non-algal particulates are higher. And of course, chlorophyll is in here as well, as often as a minority stressor, but as a minority component of light attenuation, but more important at higher wavelengths. So we're participating in this work. It's one of the things we think will be most useful is being able to hindcast conditions so that really be able to expand our knowledge of how light conditions have changed over time and under different hydrologic conditions, because we'll be able to take historical remote sensing data and hopefully get all the way to KD. Some of the comments that we've had on this before is because you tend to get a different picture depending on a different wavelength. You do what some other folks have done, which is use some integrated measures of absorbance, and also when we're breaking the results out into different components, include the effect of water, because that can be important at higher wavelengths. Next slide, please. There's various statistical analysis that's been done by various researchers, or trend analysis that we'd like to incorporate into this summary. This is just an example, once again, from Atsushi. That's a trend analysis at Adams Point, and it's one we like because it's particularly because it's a non-parametric. We think it might be a little bit more robust than some other methods. But you can see here it shows nitrogen going down. That's what we'd expect to see given all the nitrogen reductions. Chlorophyll A going up a little bit, not necessarily enough to cause a big changes in light attenuation, but TSS also going up, temperature going up. KD pretty flat, which is interesting, which might be a data limitation. We're going to be doing more types of analysis, there's a research project being led by the external advisors with PREP and CALA that's going to be doing different types of statistical analysis to look at relationships among variables. That's all going to contribute to our technical summary. Next slide, please. So, this is meant to update the conceptual model in discussion with other partners. Once again, it's a long list of stressors, and what we're seeing so far, we're certainly seeing the impacts of particularly wet weather events that tend to shock the system, but also a system that is probably less resilient to that than in the past. Due to things like feedback loops. Of course, the less grass you have, the more resuspension you have, which makes it harder to get the grass. So, there's a lot of fine particulates in there. That the question is what exactly is it? Where is it? What controls it? And the loss of filter feeders is maybe a major contributor here. So nitrogen chlorophyll A is also a contributor to light attenuation. I think where we're headed on this and what we've seen so far, it's not necessarily the master variable as we've seen in some other impacted systems, and some of the lines of evidence for that is that it is I think we're going to continue to conclude that it's a minority contributor to light attenuation, and might not have changed a whole lot since eelgrass was at its peak. But we do have a long, ways to go on this, and results of the biooptical model, for example, we'll see if that changes some of this picture. None of this would be, I think, pointing towards saying that I don't expect that this report will say it's not important to control nitrogen. I think it may be more pointing towards managing expectations of the system in terms of its sensitivity to nitrogen and what can be done with nitrogen controls alone, perhaps pointing towards the importance of some other types of projects, including direct eco-restoration. So next slide, please. Section 4 of the report, as mentioned previously, is to look at that question of nitrogen concentration or loading thresholds. And we'd like to revisit some of the technical analysis that was done leading up to the permit, including recalculation of nitrogen aerial loading rates. And this, for those of you who have read the fact sheet associated with the permit, there was a lot of discussion. Blatter and Rigo, they developed an empirical relationship of aerial nitrogen loading versus eelgrass loss. And so we'd like to update those numbers. There is, I think there been an ongoing discussion of how relevant these numbers are, or this particular analysis is for Great Bay. But we hope that some new numbers will inform that debate. We'd like it to be apples and oranges with Latimer and Rigo, which means using total dissolved nitrogen when we can get those numbers. And we also think there's probably some reason to do a little spatial refinement given that parts of the system are very riverine or marine, and other parts are very embayed, and those different parts respond very differently. So next slide, please. Just shows you some of the numbers that go into this calculation: non-point, point source loading, groundwater, and atmospheric deposition. Next slide, please. So we have a ways to go on kind of interpreting even the numbers that we've come up with so far with these new loading rates. But even looking at Latimer and Rigo, you can see some interesting things about the Great Bay. And one thing that we're highlighting on this slide is that compared to many of the estuaries in Latimer and Rigo, that the Great Bay Estuary has a far larger watershed to estuary ratio. And you maybe come back and look at these, have time to come back and look at this slide in the future and digest the table on the right. You'll see that it's not that the Great Bay watershed has high nitrogen loading like per acre of watershed. Actually, that tends to be quite modest or low, but it has a very high ratio of watershed to the to the estuary area, and that you could look at that as making it somewhat challenging. And we're not just talking about nitrogen; we're probably talking about other things like DOC and sediment, as kind of a geometry factor of the system that might make it challenging, but also on the other hand, point to the fact that perhaps compared to other systems that Latimer and Rigo looked at, the system had other compensating factors that allowed it to support higher eelgrass in the past. And we'd like to summarize, what we think those factors might be, what kind of system shifts might have occurred to decrease the effectiveness of those factors. Next slide, please. So the last section of this report is the look ahead planning approaches. Now, if you look at the existing adaptive management plan, you'll see a little discussion of pros and cons of things like TMDLs versus, I guess the term now is an advanced restoration plan, but also schedules where we have milestones of conducting the monitoring, doing some types of synthesis to come to consensus on interpretations, and then talking about what that might mean for next planning steps, whether it's a TMDL or an advanced restoration plan, or an approach that really emphasizes continued implementation with adaptive management. So this is another thing that will be updated as part of this final report. Next slide, please. So finally, I think I only have 2 slides left, but just want to talk about some of the near-term activities. We have a lot to do in 2026. Of course, there's always continued implementation, cleaning wastewater every day, planning projects. The annual report that we've talked about. A lot going on with PREP. I think Kala is one of the busiest guys in New England. We've got some long-term data analysis being, some new data analysis being led by Slava Lupcic, as shown here. We've got some additional research data deliverables coming. The next phase of the biooptical model, integration of the main communities, and continued coordination with the agencies, as we're doing today. Next slide, please. And looking beyond, when you do research, you answer one question, you bring up 2 others, and that's never in this system. That is not. I guess we're not stuck in a research loop where it's like stopping us from implementing. We're all living under a stringent nitrogen loading cap right now. But it does help us refine our research questions. So some of the things, for example, we've got a lot of resuspension of fine particulates in the system. What are the controls or sources of that? We know a lot of that what's called non-algal particulate. It's not living algae, but it may be a very fine flock of some kind, or organic in origin of some kind. We need more data on macroalgae. We get the application of the biooptical model, and maybe other types of modeling further in the future. This is not a system where we've, unlike some others, where we've been heavily reliant on a deterministic water quality model. And there have been reasons for that. It's a pretty high ticket item that may or may not in our situation really give us the answers we need. But once we start to answer some of these other questions, and we think that we might be able to model it, perhaps some additional water quality modeling might be in the future. So a lot to do. So I will conclude there and see if there are any questions for Stacy or myself.
Now we can have to questions. Okay, go ahead.
More of a comment than a question. Just you guys have heard me say this before, but I think working with Brown and Caldwell has been of enormous value to the entire community, and it brought a lot of effort and different perspective. And I really appreciate all the work, and really appreciate the way we're all working together now versus in the past. And I appreciate what Clifton and Stacy have presented here. And I think PREP would agree with all of it. So, and it's just, again, it's a great new world when that's happening. We're working together. We're very early on. We're saying, this is an interesting question. How are we going to approach this? We're not coming in with a hypothesis already in our head that we're just trying to bend the data to prove. And I really appreciate the work that Brennan and Caldwell have shown us here today. Thank you.
Well, likewise, Kelly.
Yeah, I would add on to that we as a group of communities are incredibly fortunate to have folks like PREP read these resources. I mean, we are so fortunate to have these resources that we were able to draw on and use to do all of this great monitoring and all of this great work that we needed to do. So just, I think it's a very unique set of I keep saying resources, but things that we could work with that had come together to make this this last 5 years work.
Could I ask Clifton, would it be possible for you to provide Gretchen with the PowerPoint that you just walked through? Because I expect at least some of the room might appreciate having the presentation so they could kind of look more closely at the material you presented.
Certainly, we will send it out.
That sounds great.
May I throw out another?
Absolutely.
I guess this might be more of a question. The reason that nitrogen is an issue in the first place is that it can spur productivity and lead to more organic matter in a system than is healthy for that system. And of course, another nutrient that does that is phosphorus. And I wonder if Clifton and Stacy want to speak to a potential role for phosphorus in what we're seeing in terms of eelgrass impacts. I know we haven't shown a lot of data on that, but more, I guess, theoretically or empirically, either way.
Yeah, I think we should add that to the list of things to include. It's the old paradigm of like marine systems, nitrogen limited, freshwater systems, phosphorus limited has really gone by the wayside with the recognition that there are some systems, even freshwater systems, that are nitrogen limited, and then and perhaps in a coastal environment like this, or estuarine, they're phosphorus limited parts as well. So I think the thing to put on the list is to look into that, and based on the first thing we'd start with is just looking at the concentrations relative to the types of concentrations that we know tend to limit primary productivity. I'm not prepared to come to any conclusions on that today, but maybe the next time we all get together, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well, Colin.
Thank you.
Great. All right, I'm not. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Clifton, this is Suzanne, assuming you get the additional data that you're waiting for, I know Stacy summarized some of the pieces that we're still waiting to come in. when do you think you would be next in a position to kind of share an update to what you've done now? Like when should we be looking at scheduling the next kind of meeting like this or some collection of this to further go through kind of how, where you're landing in terms of recommendations, or maybe it wants to be through the prep auspices, but I think this has been kind of working well as a format. So is it 6 months from now, do you think, or?
Yeah, well, kind of working back from, so if we would like the report all wrapped up and reviewed, and by the way, I don't think I mentioned this verbally, one of the things that we'd like to have in the report, actually, I think it's mentioned in the permit, in the concept of this report, is a DES kind of opinion. Do they concur with what the report says? And we like other people's opinions as well, too. So kind of working back from December, like to have, drafts of this early fall or so. And so I'd say 6 months is probably a good timing for where we feel like we'll have something substantial as a draft to, or at least if not the report, the pieces of the, what's going to be written up in the report with the major findings and conclusions.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't see, Jamie McCarty, you'll have to see if you can see any other hands up, but I don't.
Nope.
Well, all right, with that, then we can move on to our next topic. It's the next kind of big piece that we've been working on, is the pollutant tracking and accounting program. And I believe we are going to start off. Do you want to do an intro? Or
yeah, let's do just a brief intro while Jamie loads up the slides.
Okay, excellent. Then we will go to Jamie Gould from the UNH Stormwater Center.
So thank you. So whatever you garnered from that last presentation, there's a ton of work going on, a ton of monitoring work. I think we can all agree that estuarine systems are very complex. They don't change overnight, but we know that wet weather flows, and particularly flows from altered hydrology from urbanization. So, exchanging natural landscapes with paved and impervious landscapes has a huge impact at delivering more nutrients, more turbidity, more flows in greater concentrations of pollutants to the estuary. So we've known this for a long time. Historically, this is why we have pursued this adaptive management approach, where we know a huge part of the majority of the problem is the non-point source pollution. So you have the point sources coming from the wastewater treatment plants; those can be controlled, but we have the non-point sources, which are prolific in nature and are dominated by wet weather flows, and particularly untreated wet weather flows. So PTAP, or the Pollutant Tracking and Accounting Program or project, began as a twinkle in Ted's eye, so like back in 2012. So we've been thinking about this and doing this for a long time. And I should also note that Sally Soul is in the audience, who deserves a lot of credit for making the PTAP ship sail. So thank you to Sally as well. And Ted, I don't know if you want to say a few words about the initiation of PTAP.
But yeah, I guess I would just note that this was something that came up really early on. We really looked at what was going on in Chesapeake Bay. That's where this really came out of. And the requirements in Chesapeake Bay as part of their agreements, where they were really actually tracking the things that they were doing on the landscape. And then they were, saving all of those receipts in a shoebox and then counting them up at tax time the next year. And so you understood where you were with your credits and debits relative to that TMDL. That was really where this all came out of. And then started talking with Jamie and Sally and others about how do we get this rolling. And, I was able to pick the SRF pocket at DES early on, learning that was a pocket that could be picked and my hand fit inside. And so as I got my grubby little hands on some of those dollars, That's where we got some monitoring money originally, to sort of ramp up monitoring for this estuary. It was also where we dipped into that for development of PTAP. I don't think they quite understood that we were eventually going to spend about $350,000 of SRF funds to actually do this, but we did. And I'm so satisfied to see that it's sort of off on its own. It's fully fledged, and flying upon its own feathers. And so really happy to see where this has gone, and the 20 meetings of development, I think were certainly worth it, as was the umpteen hours I spent making really silly movie posters for you all, to try to entertain us as we went along the way. So anyway, this is extraordinarily satisfying to watch the development of this. And thanks to Jamie and Sally, the Hool and Zool show, who have really carried this out. So nice job, guys.
Can I jump in really quickly? One of the most impressive things about this to me is DES, or at least from where I'm sitting, which is as a community municipal representative, DES recognized before we did really a need that was coming that we didn't have and that was going to be difficult. And so Ted and Jamie and a few others led these meetings, and we would show up, and some of us didn't even really know what we were doing, and we'd look at clever slides, and it was fun and it was interesting. But it just really showed the partnership. You know, you knew what we needed before we needed it, and then once we really needed it, it had some wind, or it had sails. And I just think that just shows, you know, some of the collaboration, and I appreciate that as a municipality now that we aren't. I think we could have spent a lot more than $350,000 to get where we are, for sure. And I'm glad that we weren't, you know, trying to panic and react to a need. You know, we were able to kind of grow into that, and we still are growing into it. So I think that can't go without note.
Great. Yeah, so I think Ted put it best. PTAP really, in its essence, is the turbo tax for non-point source reduction credits, and the representation of the great work that all these municipalities around the table have been doing as far as controlling and managing and treating some of the flows that enter our rivers and estuary from stormwater sources. So what we're going to show you today is sort of the interim accountability as we wait for the science of the estuary to respond to all these great efforts, both point source and non-point source. We're going to show you the box of receipts, the shoebox full of receipts that the communities are developing from the vast implementation efforts. And I would say one of the most exciting things to me is once you start tracking, it's a lot of, you know, boring accounting, but there's a lot of new and innovative strategies that emerge because you're paying attention. And that's one of the things that Jamie McCarty is going to talk about. I think Portsmouth in particular has really accelerated the use of PTAP in the planning process and the incorporation of that. So James not the only one entering things into the database. He's utilizing the permitting, the development and redevelopment process to get these types of structural controls into the database. So Jamie, are you ready to talk about your efforts?
I am. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so I'm gonna just quickly step through sort of how we're using PTAP here at Portsmouth, really as it related to our private development land use permitting process. So I'm gonna share my screen here. Can you see that? Yeah. All right, so this is a lot highlighted here. It's over on Sagamore Ave. It backs up to Sagamore Creek. This image is from 2020. It was 2 lots that got merged together for this development, a couple single-family homes. And this is what it looks like now. So we utilize an application called OpenGov for our land use permitting process. Developer comes in, they want to develop a piece of land, they start an application through OpenGov, and then we have a whole workflow here of all the steps that have to be taken to complete a project and get it built. So, sort of the first, so, once this application comes in, all these workflow steps get built in automatically or get added in. And one of the steps is, we have a lot, land use development tracking form. That's the PTAP. So we have some instructions on our website on how to access it. And so what happens is you've got, your regular, here's the site plans for a new set of condominiums that are going to be going in. Here's their drainage and grading plan. You can see that it's going to be a couple infiltration ponds, a holding tank here. There's other various structural BMPs that are going to be installed as part of this project. So that goes through our TAC review. We make sure that they're putting in the right types of BMPs. Part of the requirements is a drainage analysis report. So basically, the engineer and the developer are doing all the work here. When they complete this drainage analysis plan, all the parts that are going to get submitted into PTAP are, all the hard work is done here. And really all PTAP is doing is providing a place to submit all that data. So our technical advisory committee reviews this, make sure that it's going to meet the requirements for nitrogen and phosphorus and TSS removals, flow rates, all that kind of stuff. And then, back on the land use permit, they're going to go in and click the link, go to PTAP, and start a new PTAP submission. So this is the example for this location, a whole bunch of sort of just general information about the location. But then here's the important part. Here's our structural BMPs table. So we've got a couple biofiltrations, infiltration trenches, total impervious cover, managed area, and then what the effective impervious cover is going to be afterwards. Non-structural BMPs can be put in too. So that's the, O&M of those BMPs. Catch basin cleanings are tracked here. Land use conversion, so this is all the parts. But again, this is all really done as part of their drainage analysis report. And we require this as a step. The developers complete all this and then submit it. At that point, I come in and review it, make sure that it's complete. And we put it on hold at that point because this is all in the design and planning stage. At that point, the developer works through the process here in Portsmouth. Depending on the complexity of the project, that takes some time. Then, we've got checks afterwards to make sure everything was installed correctly as per plan, any changes that had to be made. And at the completion of the project, we require as-built for the project. At that point, I'll go in and look at the as-built. We use those as-built to update our GIS, but we're also looking to make sure that the as-built reflect the what was submitted in PTAP. If any changes need to be made, we ask the developer to do that. And then more importantly, for then our annual report for the MAM, we change the submission from a approval to approved and implemented, which then the accounting actually kicks in and says, well, yep, these BMPs are in place. They're treating this amount. And then Jamie and his team do their magic to actually calculate the amount of nitrogen removal that's taking place. So if anyone has any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer.
Thanks, Jamie.
All right. So I guess we'll show you the back of the end product here, and this is kind of the money slide. So what we can do is over the permit term, and what you're seeing here is the load reductions by community over the 4 years of implementation. So the first year we were kind of training wheels. We were getting used to inputting things. We were working through kind of the mechanics of the database. And then the last 4 years we've been tracking progress. And you can see, there's a lot of progress. I think another exciting thing that has occurred is PTAP is more than just bean counting. Because we're paying attention to these things, we're also have our ear to ground for new and important and innovative science. And I think a good example of that is leaf collection. So a lot of studies out of the USGS in Wisconsin began to show that the deposition of nutrients had variability, meaning that the vast majority of nutrients are falling in New England around a certain part of the year, called fall. So we have a lot of deposition of organic material on impervious cover, and we know that that's a really important time to do some of the non-structural maintenance. And so we've been working with the city of Dover on enhancing and trying to maximize the fall leaf collection pickup. And that's a report that was funded by Great Bay 2030, which is a philanthropic initiative also run through PrEP and the Estuary Project. And so that allows us to look at operations like sweeping and try to maximize and enhance the collection of those nutrients before they get into the system and start to decay and turn into more bioavailable solid form. So I guess what else will I say? So, essentially in the end, we can track this over time. I think we started out with some of the overall things that we've been able to track, and I'll just go to the overall spreadsheet. Did that switch? Hopefully, no, it didn't. So I have to stop, reshare. Too many Excel sheets. There it is. So again, we can look at this over time. And so in the Great Bay, we've removed over 20,000 pounds of nitrogen per year from all the structural and non-structural controls. But it's not just nitrogen. So we talked about the complexity of these problems. We were addressing stormwater and treating the wetland flows. We're also reducing phosphorus. So over 2,000 pounds of phosphorus removed per year from these implementation efforts. Over half a million pounds of sediment. And then probably more to the point, we have the infiltration of 25 million cubic feet of water across these range of structural controls. And that really goes a long way to restoring the natural hydrology. So that, one could argue that a big part of the problem is the change in hydrology from urbanization. So the stormwater measures not only reduce nitrogen, but they put water back in the ground where it went historically and address other things like bacteria and phosphorus and sediments and metals. So we're really addressing more holistically the whole problem, and now we can track, we can account for this. And again, someone said magic, but we're using all the EPA Region 1 developed tools. So as you may be finding out, Region 1 is a really powerhouse. Since they administer a third of the permits in New England, they're really a big part of the solutions that we're using. So all the crediting has come out of Region 1. And then there are areas where we're enhancing, and PTAP is also funding expert panels that talk about how can we incentivize some like non-structural controls like sweeping. Portsmouth and also Rochester also did really innovative sewer separation. So now we're taking the non-point source out, we're putting it to the wastewater treatment plant, and that's all accounted for. And so we're developing credits associated with sewer. And that's all been done with PTAP as well, and through a consensus-based process. And we're submitting that to EPA for review, and certainly always open to comments and corrections. The great thing about PTAP is we're collecting the receipts. The accounting can change tomorrow, and it likely will as the science improves. But since we have all those receipts in the database, we can adjust that credit at any time as the science evolves. So I really feel like it's a great kind of a product, and it's really been successful largely through the implementation by the communities around the table today. So thank you very much for being partners in that, and to DES for initiating it, for MAM for continuing to fund it. And I think once you start looking at this more closely, you find all kinds of innovative and strategic ways to cost effectively reduce these inputs. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'm gonna jump really quick. One more thing. I think Jamie McCarty sort of showed that all the work is being done by the engineers or the developers or things like that. Anyway, this stuff is being done. There's some communities have a disconnect between what they're receiving as information in these drainage reports and just getting it into PTAP. And so we've really been brainstorming options to help all of our communities. The large ones seem to have it a pretty smooth process. From the smaller ones, it just needs that last little step. And so we're hoping to maybe partner with the RPCs to maybe have them be able to work with the communities and gain more and more success. Another thing worth noting is, as I mentioned at the beginning, this is available to everyone. Everywhere in the state can use it. So while we're focusing on the total nitrogen general permit in the Great Bay today, all the MS4 communities can start doing this. As Jamie talked about, he's talking about volume and phosphorus and things like that. It's just a tool that can keep growing. So I think that's a real co-benefit of this project.
Yeah, that's a great point, Gretchen. I probably should have shared that Tom Swenson's on the call as well. So through the MS4 program permit, all the PTAP and that tracking is all available to all the MS4 permittees. It uses the same requirements and accounting requirements required under our permit. And they are now, DES is now the home for PTAP. For some reason, I can't share my screen again, but so it was the UNH website is a great resource, but we go through all these updates and iterations. So we really found a home on the DES website. And so this is something, it has all the trainings that we do, and it keeps track of all the outreach that DES has continued to support us with, again, to communities beyond MAM. So I think it's really becoming a regional resource. And yeah, we're thankful to DES for continuing to be a partner and help us keep track of all the good work.
I just want to share something, and this isn't intended to be meaning criticism, but I was picking up on Jamie talking about the leaf debris and emerging technology. And absolutely, it makes sense to get the leaf debris off the road, and then we debate, does it impact the growing season? Just to share a logistical challenge, I think Melissa and Tom, we were chatting about, municipally sharing resources to get leaf debris. In the city of Dover, when we sweep that debris, we found out it's classified as municipal solid waste. That's like, well, if you can find a place to get rid of it, that would be fantastic. So now we're working with that hurdle. What we do in Dover, we really encourage people to bring yard debris to our recycling center Because if it's clean, we truck it across town to a licensed composting facility for beneficially reusing it. We had to, not very popular with residents, but people were putting waste in I call them the cardboard, the brown paper bags. So we have to have people dump it so that we can self-police that it's clean. And so we're sort of seeing that because of the trash component when we sweep, it's now a licensed solid waste. And like in Dover, we built the catch basin sweepings facility. I gotta get that facility licensed as a solid waste facility. So I gotta train people to be solid waste licensed so that we can capture the debris and wash it. So there's just some hurdles as we start to work through this operationally, and I'm confident we will get there. But it's like, hey, this is a great idea, and now we have to implement it. And it's like, oh boy, it's gonna take us a little bit to get all the ducks in a row to optimize this and make it happen. So it's kind of like, great idea. And I go, oh yeah, we gotta work through these hurdles, but we'll get there. It just takes some time to catch up.
And to bounce off that, I think Ted's can fit into the SRF pocket again or something. But anyway, DES really stepped up and has been helping work through that project. And I think Ted, you were really instrumental in that. And so there's a lot of discussion and talk about how we're managing the street sweepings and the catch basin cleanings. As John says, we will get there.
Yeah, just you got to work through these little by little.
Yep.
But I think it also underscores my point. Until you actually start to do the work and keep track of it, you don't realize that those demons are lurking in the background, right? If we just were ignoring it, then those would be barriers that we wouldn't be now climbing over. So it's a testament to the fact that this does take time, but that taking those first few steps as we've done here through this group is really beneficial in the end, I think, to the whole, because it makes everything easier in the end. And we can work together. We're collaborating with DES on a panel right now that's looking at a statewide beneficial reuse policy for these this road area.
Yes, Suzanne, sorry.
Has it ever come up how to calculate either credits or debits on the CSO separation projects as they relate to these?
So I just went to a NOEA event on this. Yeah. They're doing it down in Cambridge.
It's something we've struggled with for a really long time at DES to try to understand, mostly from kind of like more of a sort of pollution, sort of NIPD's end of pipe kind of issue. And it would be interesting to see how you would apply some of this, because on the one hand, you're not treating some of what you otherwise would.
Yes.
Because if you separate,
correct. Yeah.
But on the other hand, you're not overflowing some pretty nasty stuff on a regular basis. So it is a really interesting balance of how those curves cross.
Yes. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, to respond to that, I mean, because of course Portsmouth does a lot of sewer separation. Most of the times when we are separating, we are also then adding infrastructure, which we're tracking, for those either additional outfalls or wherever that water is subsequently going, the clean water, the storm water. So, we've got a project right now at Fleet Street project under our consent decree. And that project, includes, a fair amount of sewer separation, and we're looking at a new outfall. Well, there's space that we're negotiating with our, impacted property owners for those facilities to take out pollutants before it outfalls. So I think it's not going to the wastewater treatment facility, which has all its benefits, as we know, but there is actually treatment coming, when we're headed to a new outfall. So I think it is getting captured. Yeah. I want to pick up on another point that, when Tom, Melissa, and John and I were talking with the Jamies about 2 weeks ago with regard to PTAP. And I guess I'd love to hear from any of the smaller communities that are not yet using PTAP. We thought to invite, through some thinking, who could we invite to this meeting to maybe help the smaller communities, get their information into PTAP, because that is, part of what we're trying to do is be a resource to the smaller communities, because we're used to doing these things. And, you know, we're lucky we have a Jamie McCarty, and we also have a very large planning department that's good about updating its regs to make sure we're getting the drainage reports. We've got a system to track it. And so if there's anything more that we can do as an organization or kind of help facilitate, that's part of what we think the benefit of this coming together is that we can put our heads together and see how do we help you, because we recognize resources are thin.
There is a question, I think, from Michael Curry.
Right. Michael Curry?
Sorry, I was just having a coughing fit. I'm not here representing any specific community. Like Sean mentioned, I've been working with Newmarket on it. I can speak on behalf of Dennis Messier and South Berwick a little bit with some of the recent work we've been doing with them. I mean, it's really difficult for them to sort of wrap their arms around it. And I think it's especially true for communities like South Berwick and Rollinsford. It's another one where the district and the town are separate. So those are some of the challenges that I've seen. Yeah, it's a staffing thing in a lot of cases, right? Like these communities are trying to do everything that they can to meet a nitrogen permit at their treatment plant with no staff. And then the additional administrative efforts that they're having to put forth on the permit side, especially with some of the new permit requirements, there's not enough people to do the work. So inevitably, I'd say the low-hanging fruit ends up not getting done. And whether we like it or not, PTAP ends up being one of those things, right? They're more worried about meeting disinfection permit limits and total nitrogen limits rather than doing something that oftentimes a lot of them see as administrative. So I think they're still trying to wrap their arms around it to figure out how to do it most effectively.
You know, I think that's a really good point, because we certainly see some of the challenges, you know, from, you know, Newington, for example. You know, there is that disconnect where you've got a separate sewer district and then you've got a whole town infrastructure. The shame is, and I think this is why we have these conversations, is there a way to help bridge that gap? Because as a practical matter, it's a lot of the communities I think we've been talking about have updated stormwater ordinances. So they have pretty strict requirements when property is redeveloped and those stormwater infrastructure pieces are going in. So it really is a small reporting piece. And the question is, you know, how do we reach the town side to say, look, can you just have someone on your planning department, you know, tell the developer, require the developer to put this information in, and then we figure out where's the resource to help just do that double check like Jamie McCarty does for Portsmouth. Yep, the project's done, you know, infrastructure's in the ground, it's working, approved, and the credit happens. And that's what we're trying to figure out. How do we help bridge that gap? Because the gap is there and has been articulated.
Right, and it's not that the work isn't being done and the water quality improvements aren't happening, it's just this administrative piece. So
I mean, maybe it's a conversation with the various town managers to say, look, can you do this piece? Maybe it's the sewer district meeting with someone from MAM to say, look, can you help us? You know, it's a small ask, it's a small lift, but it helps the entire community. I don't know, I'm putting it out there.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think there's one of the difficulties is that all these communities, you know, as you know, all these communities have different formats, different hierarchies in their planning departments in terms of how they handle working with developers. And I know it's a small ask. I understand that piece, but you know what I constantly hear back is it's sort of death by 1,000 cuts for them, right? When you have 100 people all asking for a small ask, they're, you know, oftentimes they're trying to just figure out what's the priority. And you know, I think I'm seeing it a little bit on the South Berwick side right now, where they're, you know, again, they're trying to get their feet under them to figure it out. And the things that you mentioned, I think, are really helpful in terms of putting it on the developer. But again, it's sort of the same story. Developers come in all different shapes and sizes, and I think a lot of the developers are going to put their arms up and say, I don't know, or you're going to end up getting an input that's completely off base and doesn't really track with what reality is. So there's a balance that I've seen, at least with communities, trying to make sure that they're inputting not just data, but data that's appropriate and accurate with what's going on. And when that happens, a lot of times you need it to funnel through a single person that's going to be the person that says yes or no. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for sure.
So I'll throw it out there. This is Mark Sanborn again from EPA Region 1. I'm going to get into this in my comments when we get to the part of the agenda. So this will be a little repeat, but I want to throw out there because one of the main points I was going to make is the importance of putting the data into the system, because that's what we use. So if there's anything we can do to reinforce how important that is, a letter from us, if there's something, and I don't want it to come across as like accusatory or big government, because we want to be respectful of everything you just laid out about, I'm obviously a Granite State native. A lot of small communities, a lot of folks maximizing, their staffs and resources. So I don't want it to come across in a negative way, but if there's a way we can have a tone that equals, this is ultimately, if you just putting in this effort pays real dividends in terms of permitting and how we can make sure we're putting together the right permits and working with you all. If we can do something on our end, let us know. We will, because you're going to hear one of my main messages is the importance to us that the data is getting in there, because that's what's going to be a lot of the basis for the information and the data used for the permit requirements.
This is Tom Swenson from DES. If I could just say
thank
something.
you, Tom. I'm sorry, you've had your hand up for a while.
That's all good. There's some great discussions going on. I just wanted to let everybody know that we recently booked 2 PTAP trainings that are coming up. There's one coming up on March 16th, and that one is just a basic structural and non-structural data entry refresher. If anybody's looking for that, that's being hosted by UNH and DES. And then on April 2nd, we have a more advanced subject training where we're going to be talking about those municipal regulations that Jamie McCarty was just talking about. And we're going to be going into more depth on that. We've never done a training like that, at least in recent years. So these might be a great opportunity too, if you're looking to get into it or if you're looking to take it to the next level. These trainings are available, and I can put the links in the chat and the times too, if that helps.
You don't necessarily need to be using OpenGov. I mean, you can do this by hand. A PTAP was set up to be done manually, and most engineers that are doing this type of permitting or project development, they learn really quickly because it's very consistent with how they're sizing their systems already. All you need to know is the dimensions of your system and then contributing area, and you can enter it into PTAP.
Yeah,
So
the only thing we're using PTAP for, OpenGov for is just for reminding people that it's a requirement. It's reminding staff that it's something that we have to look at. All the data entry and all of that is being done in PTAP. So OpenGov's just there for us to keep the permit progressing and also not forgetting steps that are required.
Yeah, go ahead, Jake.
One thing I've noticed with working with small towns is they love getting money from new development, like impact fees. So I don't know if something could be done at the state level. I know they just started allowing impact fees for highway departments. Maybe it's you can charge those fees or you can charge stormwater related impact fees if you participate in PTAP.
I'm afraid there's conversations going on in the chat that I'm not seeing.
There definitely are.
I know.
So I'm getting some tested in.
Let's see if I can get those.
Numerically, Gretchen.
Numerically on the chat?
Yeah, I thought it said 33.
Oh, no, not 13 is what I said.
13, all right.
But you did one of them.
So maybe Mike Levinsky fell and he gave it up.
Instead of Aguilera,
Yeah, I sent a note about the city of Somersworth. We're developing an online permit software using SmartGov. We're in the training and kind of the backroom installation phase right now. Hope to get it on in sometime in the early spring. And we do require developers to access PTAP, and been doing that last couple of years. Amber's been working with developers, as is our planning staff. It's going well, I think. I don't know, Amber, if you want to comment.
Yeah, we have the requirement that they submit as a part of their site plan prior to the pre-construction meeting that they submit initially, and then before they get their CO at the end of the project, they're required to update so we can mark it as constructed in the PTAP system.
Great, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna scroll through some of the. Danielle talked, there was some discussion about the sewer separation.
So I can speak to two things. One, Newmarket's experience was very hard to get onto the PTAP because we had our planning department were old school, been around a long time, and I used to have to hire an engineer to come in, and there was no communication to help them get it done. Now Lindsay's come on board as our town engineer, and now it goes great. Thank you, Lindsay. The other piece of the treatment versus, sewer separation, it's cheaper to separate it and to do it on site and take it off. It's way too expensive to pump, to add chemicals, to add air, to mix. It's far better than what you're doing. So as an operator or past operator's treatment, you're better off to separate it. The cost wise.
Yeah. I want to add one more thing with, and I think we could have an offline conversation about getting smaller communities into the PTAP, but the communities have planning regulations that have thresholds that require certain levels of drainage analysis. And so when, whether it's 5,000 square feet of disturbance or 20,000 square feet of disturbance, which is kind of what's regulated, there are these thresholds. So a very small community that has very little things coming through maybe isn't reaching the PTAP threshold. And it's once they're doing the drainage plan, that's when it would go into PTAP, and you've already got that information. So somebody, at some level, either it's through third-party review or somebody's reviewing it. So this is just another step. So I really believe that there's an opportunity and there's a way to do it. It hasn't happened yet, and we need to figure it out. But I think there's a lot of people thinking about how we're going to do that and how we're going to make it work. I think we've got new potential project partners. We've got, Ted had some good ideas. So I think you're going to see this, some progress soon.
Couple quick points. Yeah. First, Mark, I really like the idea of EPA encouraging more widespread use of the tool. And I really like the idea of some regional effort to support communities that aren't using it yet. And Gretchen, I don't know if by third-party review you were getting to this, but I wanted to reinforce an earlier comment about the accuracy of the inputs. Because I think it's an important point that, if it's just what developers are providing, maybe some of those inputs aren't accurate. And my understanding, Suzanne, is that Jamie, you have staff that are putting eyes on it and ensuring that what goes in is accurate. So I don't know if that's what you were getting at, a third-party review, but yeah, I think that's another important element of sort of regional support of this effort. If there's some way to just assure the quality of the information that's going in.
That's right. I would say the drainage reports that are going in, presumably, this might be a stretch, but presumably some they're accurate, right? That's
engineer has stamped it.
Yeah, somebody, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. An engineer has stamped this. So somebody's putting their professional stamp on the line. You know, the errors can be made, but the presumption is that there is accuracy. I also think that we recognized, and Jamie did not talk about it today so much, but the importance of doing all this little data, but then also taking every 5 years a big picture look, because it's trends. So you're going to track this very small stuff, and you talked about 2,000 pounds and stuff like that. It really adds up. It's a lot of really little things that are adding up, and then you also have to take this big picture look and see, okay, are the trends that you're seeing in PTAP matching up with the big picture trends? And I think that's important.
Jamie, does PTAP capture the overall size of, say, the parcel or the lot or the disturbance area that would be affected here?
Yeah, I think I know where you're going. It does. The difference is, I think someone alluded it to, everybody has different trigger thresholds. So, you know, some people's trigger might be 5,000 square feet of disturbance. So they're putting in that land use change. Other people might be an acre, and they're putting in only land use change on acre or larger parcels. And so really, I think we can do this regionally a lot easier. And that's kind of the push now. We do have a subcommittee that Jamie McCarty's on, and we're talking about how to develop regional trends with respect to land use change that we can track through like the National Land Cover Database. And they update those changes every year. So is that something that's sufficient to then be a gauge of our implementation efforts, keeping track and keeping up with the changes in land use?
Well, I guess where I was kind of wondering is that the reason why I was asking that, I was just thinking that how many, for the non-participatory communities, we could certainly pull all their AOT permits over a course of 5 years.
There you
That's
go.
how the calculations
Yeah.
for all the same things. And that
Great
may be
idea.
something that would require somebody to then go through. Or maybe that's, you know, maybe that's an intern activity or something like that that could happen over a summer. So I think that that's a possibility. We should probably just chat through. Maybe what we can do is we can just do a data dump, find out how many there are by the various different communities that are affected by the permit. And then we can have a conversation about whether or not that is meaningful, given this issue of 5,000 versus 100, versus an acre versus 2.5 acres. I don't know, I just threw that out there as an idea.
And we have developed a
Really good idea.
We have developed a batch import tool. So Rochester's used it, Dover's used it, Portsmouth has used it for existing BMPs that, you know, you put the information in and we can just batch import it into the database. So we do have that capability.
And it's associated with map and lot or something. I would just thinking through, like
Yeah.
Rochester's put a lot of stuff in. We wouldn't be redundant because you would be the same map and lot,
Right.
so it wouldn't be.
You could do that
Yeah.
data check.
Yeah. Great. Cool. Great conversation. All right. Then let's move on. Yes. So this is exciting. So a lot of us have talked about the things that we've been talking about, but we're really excited to have EPA here with us today. And I also want to thank you, Mel Cote for a number of years attended. Danielle Gato has been a regular attendee and giving us feedback. So we all really appreciate just kind of steady feedback and participation, but we are glad that you all are here.
Well, unfortunately, you have to put up with me instead of those great people, at least for the beginning part, to set this up. So I will be handing it over. I think just to preempt, because I think we are going to do a couple slides. So someone, if Danielle, if we could give Danielle could get permission to.
All right. Yeah.
But I'm just going to tee it up, and I won't. It was funny as we were going through. I'm not going to give the full stump speech I give when I go and do speeches and stuff. But I'm going to do the 60 and 90 cents, 60 to 90 second early piece because I think it informs how, as an agency, we're approaching things broadly. So at least under this administration. So the three themes I go over and over again my most senior folks, Ken and all the other directors, our whole agency staff, and anyone I talk to is the three things under Administrator Zeldin and what we're doing is statutes. Everything goes back to statutes for this administration. Our decision making, our compass is what are the federal requirements in statute. As a former member of Congress, it's very important to Administrator Zeldin that the executive branch doesn't legislate, that we enact and administer the laws as written. So everything goes, what's in the Clean Water Act, what's in the Clean Air Act, what's in CERCLA, what's in RECR, what's in TSCA. That's our guiding light. Consistency, agency-wide, nationwide. So for us, you should get, if you have a question about what are the federal requirements under the Clean Water Act, you should get the same response from headquarters as you do from the regions, and you should get the same answer in Region 1 that you get in Region 8. And how we're applying that to all 50 states. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to have 50 exact same water programs. It actually means the opposite. You're not. Each of those, what it looks like in those 50 states is going to look a little different because they're going to take their federal requirements and then decide what their overall state program needs to look like. But in terms of what the federal requirements are, that should be consistent across the board. Again, and you should get the same answer if you're talking at a Superfund site as you do if you're a community on a water requirement or an air requirement. And then what do statutory-based decision making and consistent application lead to? Hopefully, it leads to predictability. We're looking for we want there to make sure, and we want that for all states, all stakeholders, private and public sector. Again, we have a responsibility to transparently, effectively outline what the federal requirements are, what the policy agenda we're looking for, and to give everyone from a small community to a large developer to an energy company. They should all have a good sense of what they're going to hear from an EPA employee, whether again headquarters, someone in the region, someone in Region 3, someone in Region 10. For today, again, really, I promised you, so anyone who saw me, write my notes before, a lot of what I was going to talk about was, we talked about this when we did our prep meeting for this, was the importance of the data, the system, getting that information in there. We use it, it's how we know what progress is being made, it's how we know what's happening in these communities and overall, and so that's really important. Overall, this is a really good time to just take a look with the general permit expiring and looking at the next one. It's a great time to take a snapshot of what is working, and there's been a lot of progress and a lot of success from you all and the DES and the EPA team, not me, folks who actually do the work, deserve a lot of credit with all the collaboration and partnership that's happened and the progress that's made. But it's also a good time to take a look what could be done better. As I mentioned, and again, it's funny, with the training coming up, again, if a letter with the right tone, not accusatory, but supportive, could help reinforce the importance. I'm happy to put something together and get it out for you guys to distribute among communities and partners. It's also a good time to take a look at the actual activities, the structural and non-structural activities that communities. Maybe you're already doing some of them, and they're just not being counted. Or maybe there are things that can be done that, if you take a look at the activities we're hoping happen, it's a good time to take a look at communities. Again, understanding, and this changes depending on the size and resources of the community. Get it. Communities are strapped right now. There's no one has enough resources, whether they be staff or financial. And the community members are strapped, and the businesses, the residents, the folks who make our communities. Everyone is feeling that crunch right now. But that's even more reason why we have to make sure we're supporting each other to produce good outcomes, because that's where you'll get the best outcomes. And the last thing I wanted to say is The success of this approach has been based on voluntary involvement, agreeing to the activities and to the submitting of the data so that we can see what's happening in this watershed, we can see what's happening in these communities, we can see the progress being made. That's the balance of not having more heavy-handed, permitting requirements. So, and the approach we're taking, we feel good about where we are. You're going to hear, we do think there's some work to be done, but it's overall a positive message, and we're in a positive place in all this. But in order to continue moving this forward, it's a good time to take a look. What do we all need to do, and what's going to make sense? And we 100% want to do that in collaboration and partnership with everyone. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ken and the team to kind of go over some thoughts we had.
Can I say before you get going, I guess as my job, I probably should have kept us on time, and we are not on time, but I don't rush. I want to let's have this meeting. So I apologize for where we are.
I'm trying to be as fast as I can.
No, don't. I don't want you to.
Ted was
really
saying
important.
the good news is when I told him, you guys did a whole bunch of things, like, that means you get to talk less. So
Yeah.
that's good.
All right.
Which is good for everyone.
All right.
Hand it over to Ken. Just go right in.
Yeah, okay.
Danielle, you're up.
Okay, yeah, I think I'll
the mic
start.
above it.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle. Can you all hear me?
Gotcha.
Yes, okay, good. Okay, yeah, great. So thanks. First of all, I wanted to say thanks for the invite to the meeting, and thanks for all those who presented and shared all the good information before us. It was really helpful, and it does seem like there's a lot of good work going on in so many different areas. So that was all very exciting and helpful for me to kind of get up to speed on where everybody's at. We have a very sophisticated slideshow that we want to show you that is 2 slides long, and I will present on the first slide and Danielle will present on the second slide. Basically repeating a lot of what you all had shared. And I think the main takeaway, which I'll share up front, is that it seems to us that we've made very good progress over these last 5 to 10 years on nitrogen reductions, especially from the POTW side. And it's also very encouraging to see things ramping up more and more on the stormwater side. And we think that that is the right place to continue to focus going forward. So with that as the kind of preamble here, Danielle already shared my slide here. This is a picture of the full bar here shows the total nitrogen load from all of the POTWs within the watershed back in 2012 to 2016. So that's the baseline load from 10 plus years ago. The light green portion of the bar shows the reduction that was required based on the 2020 permit limits. So that was a very significant drop from 10 years ago. And then the light blue portion shows what communities, what you all have done, even beyond what those 2020 permit limits required. I think there was some incentive in the kind of permitting scheme to not just meet the limits, but to even go beyond the permit limits. And we've seen that that's happened so far. We do think that there's even room for, there's a couple of POTWs that could probably still do better, aren't quite meeting their limits. So this could even get more. But even where we're at today, just, from where we were 10 years ago, you see a very significant, on the left, it shows that it's about a 70% reduction in the total nitrogen that's coming from all of the POTWs in the watershed. So that, I think, is worth highlighting and kind of congratulating you all as a very good job up to this point on, some very significant loads of nitrogen have come out of the Great Bay system. And so we're really happy to see that. The second point to highlight on this is, if you go down to the very bottom part of the bar, just the black portion, that is the amount that we could never expect to get out, at least in the near future, from all the POTWs. That would be how low we could potentially get if we took the kind of alternative approach of setting limits at 3 milligrams per liter for all of the POTWs. So what that leaves basically is just this smaller purple bar, which is what's left that we haven't gotten out of the system that we could potentially get out of the system. And the fact that it's, fairly small portion of what we were looking at 10 years ago is very encouraging. And I think a good positive result of all the work that we all collectively have put in to get to this point. And so on the POTW side, the message is we've done a great job. We probably could even do a little bit better with some of the, further reductions of a few that maybe aren't quite at their limits yet. But in general, we think that the focus, as it's already shifting more and more to the stormwater side, is very appropriate and positive for future progress. And then with that, I'll pass it to Danielle to share on the next slide.
Thanks, Michael. So this is on the stormwater side. These are the total nitrogen reductions from just stormwater control measures. So these are structural and non-structural controls that have been reported in PTAP. So it doesn't include, to note, the septic tie-in, which is a significant portion for those two towns. But we were just kind of comparing just the stormwater piece. And, there's the message is very similar to the information that Brown and Caldwell showed, which was, 3 towns, and that Jamie showed, which is 3 towns doing, a lot of entry into PTAP and getting a lot of stormwater reductions. And then some of the smaller towns maybe stepping into the PTAP sphere and starting to put their information in and to learn. There's a couple of towns that definitely need some help. So, I encourage you to reach out to myself or to Jamie or to Sally or to Tom Swenson, and we can try and get you some help to get your stuff into PTAP, because, within the 4 corners of the NPDES program, we have effluent data and we have sort of the crediting that was laid out in the 2016 Massachusetts MS4 permit, which is the performance curves, which is the magic that goes behind PTAP and calculates all these things. That's the data that we have to evaluate sort of going forward under the permit. Is it sensible and reasonable to continue this approach, to continue to focus on the stormwater, or to, kind of switch? And is it better to try and get that pink bar that Michael just showed, that last little bit? And what we heard from Brown and Caldwell particularly is that there are a lot of impacts that impacts water quality in Great Bay, not just total nitrogen. There's light, there's TSS, there's phosphorus, and the thing that the additional benefits from these stormwater control measures are that it attaches all of those things, not just nitrogen, right? So we get more benefits with the stormwater control measures than we do potentially with just coming down with more stringent limits at the POTWs. But these are the things that we're weighing and thinking about. And I think, that's really all we had.
And we'll, I see people taking pictures with their phones and stuff. We'll provide these slides to the group so they can take.
Sure, I can provide the slides. This is literally from you. You all put the information in, and these are directly from the PTAP reports. And from the, ECHO, the downloadable NetDMR system, but I can certainly provide the slides, no problem.
Yeah, thank you.
And now we're being respectful of time, open to questions, obviously. That's mainly our biggest thing we're here for, is to hear the questions you all have.
All right.
Ask away.
Who's first? Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
For the EPA crew, are there pots of money that you feel are being under applied for? Small pots of money that could be used to pay and help staff with getting more PTAP data in?
So there are very few pots of money, and none of them aren't being well tapped into. I know. Ted jokes about it, but Ted is, as a state, getting their SRF dollars. Congress appropriates the dollars, we allocate them to the states in those programs. That's where you guys are going to be able to work, with DES, and that's the best pot of funding we have available.
Just a quick follow-up. Thanks, Mark. Steve and Ted, are the SRF funding do you feel municipalities are going after them with the amount of vigor that they should, or are they being under-tapped?
We are oversubscribed across all of those programs. And we're, as many people may know, that's just continue to be Debbie Downer here, is that we are going over a clip with both SRF and with the bill money that we've had for the last few years, enjoyed for the last few years. They're really coming to an end. SRF is being cut by well over 60%, not because of EPA's efforts, but because of Congress's efforts. Those are the congressionally directed spending earmarks, which have an impact on our bottom line. Those are things that are going to dramatically impact municipalities in implementing the kinds of projects that you all wish to implement in the future. If you are interested in any of those subjects, please talk to me later, and I can give you some talking points on them.
I would just add too, you'll find no, Deb Loisel has been tireless in promoting the use of SRF funds for stormwater. And you'll find like no state, I don't think, throughout the country applies more dollars, proportionately to stormwater from the SRF. SRF traditionally has been a wastewater and drinking water upgrade fund, and Deb has really been exemplary in making sure communities understand and making those dollars available for stormwater related projects. Thanks to her.
I don't mean to take time away from EPA because maybe it's next steps, but I would suggest that MAM consider this as a topic. How do we optimize the PTAP? I think one of the strengths of MAM is bringing together all the communities to share in effort and costs. We fund some of PrEP, we fund some of Brown and Caldwell. Maybe we have to find a mechanism or a way to fund to optimize the PTAP participation. So I think that could be a good next step. Maybe MAM hires a part-time person through PrEP or Brown and Caldwell just to make sure that we're getting all that data entry. To Administrator Sanborn's point, is you stress the data. I think it's critical that we ensure as the communities that we're getting the data in, and to Tom Irwin's point, to make sure that the data is accurate.
You're definitely not taking time away from us. That is an important part of the message, so I appreciate that.
That's great. Go ahead, Suzanne. I was just update on the MS4 permit, since there is obviously an interplay. And, as I was hearing Jamie talk about, the PTAP tool as helping the municipalities and other regulated communities also use that for their MS4 reporting, to the extent we can, again, be efficient and not do multiple reports, or at least have a single place to draw from. That certainly helps us out from an administrative point of view. And Jamie McCarty would be very happy if all his tasks, were streamlined.
Danielle, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I can. So, EPA is also trying to efficiently use our resources. And we have very few permit writers and a lot of permits to write. But we're working really hard on the Massachusetts final MS4 permit right now. And the New Hampshire, we have folks working on that one as well. And we are trying to maximize sort of the changes that might be made in Massachusetts into New Hampshire first, so that we don't have to respond to all the same comments all over again. So it will follow the Massachusetts final, but we're hoping, that it's not too far. We're working on it hard. And our timeline for the final is this year, calendar year. So if that helps with the New Hampshire, it should follow that.
Thank you.
I do just want to quickly note there's like two aspects to PTAP that maybe I don't want to get missed. There's, a lot of the stormwater regulations with AOT and things, they apply to new construction. So that's new nitrogen load. So definitely put those into PTAP. We want to see that. But as Jamie mentioned, land use conversion increases nitrogen generally compared to sort of pre-development conditions. So that's actually a sort of an increase in nitrogen. We also really encourage you to put existing BMPs, existing stormwater control measures into PTAP as well. And the other thing that's a little bit confusing for, I think, from the MS4 perspective is for the town of Durham. I'm not sure Durham is there today, but they have two MS4s, right? They have the MS4 community and then the non-traditional UNH. But for the purposes, I think, of the Great Bay Total Nitrogen General Permit, they could probably use those UNH PTAP entries to calculate their Durham entries for that one purpose, because they're not two permittees under that one. Just kind of those weird little, technical pieces, that things to think about.
Ken was gonna add something else. You want to follow up?
No, I've got a slightly different question.
So I just wanted to kind of back up and big picture for a second, because I know I'm not the only one who was in meetings 10, 12 years ago. What are we going to do with Great Bay? And if you, and it's a totally different picture now, obviously. If you could have a bar chart that showed how much conflict and controversy there was then compared to now, it would look like those nitrogen charts, or maybe even better. And the amount of common purpose and coordination and strategic planning together has gone off the charts, and it's just an amazing. This is one of the real success stories in environmental policy. Obviously, we haven't restored Great Bay yet, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but just being on the track we're on now compared to where we were 10 years ago is incredible, and credit to everybody in this room.
Well, we're boring.
Believe me, I got plenty of non-boring, so boring is fine. Go ahead.
Yeah. One of the things we've talked about is, Portsmouth is not the only municipality that actually buys land for conservation purposes. And it's funny because we talk about how often, if you can keep the land from development, because you want it for passive recreation or to buffer, some area, but you don't get any credit for that. Now, we do sometimes get money, thank you, DES, for, preserving some of our properties around our water sources, et cetera. But that's something we've talked about, Melissa Paley and I have talked about, that it's a little frustrating, because when you do that piece to actually acquire land to keep it from moving into, development, there's no way to account for that. And yet we think that's valuable. And so if there's any way, because we've kicked it around a little bit at various meetings, how it's hard to find a way to show it as a nitrogen reduction, but as a practical matter, it is invaluable from our point of view to help protect a water body. So I just throw that out there, because we have not come up with any great ideas to share with Jamie or anyone else, but the more people you talk to, maybe there's a way to, at some point, reflect the fact that some communities are investing in conserving land as a way to protect water quality.
When Ken's typing something, that means it's going in his notes for further thoughts. And so duly noted.
Maybe just a thought on that, Ken, is that it's not necessarily a credit per se relative to nitrogen control, but it ought to be considered part of the reasonable assurance that we think about as because of the error bars around all of this related to how much nitrogen is too much. Maybe that's where this actually gets credited, is by feeling a little, in our margins of safety we put on things and other stuff like that, where because there's all the land conservation going on, we feel more confident in maybe sharpening the pencil a little bit. Anyway, I just throw that out there as sort of maybe a mental construct to think about how land conservation might apply in a regulatory setting.
Discussion topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I know we want to be respectful of everyone's time, but certainly open to any more questions or move on. Tom,
yeah,
I was surprised you hadn't raised your hand yet, so I appreciate it.
This is shifting gears a little bit. I really appreciate hearing Danielle talk about the balancing you're going through, the evaluation you're going through. We've been looking at this through the same lens, so that and that the bars that you're outlined is really a helpful tool. So we've been struggling with that question as well, about this model versus how to get after that purple bar. So I think the man communities know that's the lens that we've been looking through when looking at this approach. We're really pleased with the the way the municipalities have come together, to Ken's point, to make real progress and innovate. For the record, I need to state that CLF would be very concerned, is very concerned with the prospect of an indefinite administrative continuance of the permit. So we hope you're going through that. You will be going through that evaluation process from the inception of this permit. You know, when several of us entered a settlement agreement 5 years ago, it was our working assumption that right now, at the 5-year mark, that evaluation would be taking place. That there really wouldn't be much gap between this permit and the next one. So just to reiterate, you know, we know that there will be an administrative continuance, but are concerned about that going on.
So can I just, so the comments I'm making should be taken as general, not specific. But generally speaking, the administration, you know, while we're here, want to make sure, you know, what did I talk about? Statutory base, consistency, predictability, right? So, you know, having permits issued, generally speaking, you know, accomplish those goals. So, your point is well taken and well received. We understand where you're coming from, and our goal in all our areas of jurisdiction and responsibility is to give folks an understanding of what they're being asked to do, what the requirements are, and have expectations. So, generally speaking, we want to accomplish that, and certainly having defined permits achieve those goals. So, totally understand where you're coming from, and we want to. The only thing I'll say specifically in this case is, given the progress that's been made, we want to make sure we take a look on how we've made the progress and how that should best reflect, you know, getting a new permit in place.
Yep, absolutely. You know, that makes perfect sense. And I guess I'll just build on that by saying, you know, we view the administrative continuance of the permit as an important moment in time and really an opportunity for EPA to help keep this effort moving forward effectively. I think, for example, you know, you talk about the possibility of a letter to the communities encouraging certain actions. I think it'd be great if EPA took this moment in time to encourage communities that aren't part of MAM to join MAM, and to encourage communities that aren't at the table today to come to the table.
So yeah, so I know I appreciate that. Let me think about a way we can I get in things get approved a lot easier if it talks about the success of what has happened versus you know, pointing fingers at what isn't happening. So you know, maybe again, let me talk to my folks, because I don't want to get above my skis here. But let's I am open to talking about a way that we can you know, put out a message about the success that's happened, and you know, how the participation of the members joining the various, you know, MAM and the various groups, and the utilizing the tools and entering the data and looking for how that's produced positive results. So let us take that back and figure out the right way to get that message out effectively.
Just kind of picking up on how, one way to frame it is how to make the best use of this interim period. And one really great use of this time is as much progress, as much as we can accelerate the progress on the non-point source side, including, you know, a lot of people are doing great stuff, but building on that by bringing in more communities is only going to help increase the weight on that side as we think through what makes sense for the next round of permitting. So this extra period, and it's not going to be indefinite. It's our idea is not, well, let's, as long as everything seems to be making progress, let's let it sit. That's not our idea. We're just have priorities and trying to figure out how to get what goes out in what sequence. It's not going to be an indefinite pause. So, but it is a little more time for expanding the circle, building on all the good work that's already being done, kind of complete the picture, and that will really help when we get to the analysis of what makes sense to do in the next wastewater treatment facility permit.
Yes, Suzanne?
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, ma'am, members, I don't know if we need a vote or anything, but I think there would be definite interest in a communication, particularly around the data. The success for the communities that have entered the data, because of course this is budget season, it's helpful for those that are working on budgets to understand that investment of, the person, who's getting that work done. So I think that's valuable to hear that is successful and that you all are relying on that data from a regulatory point of view. And then the encouragement for those that aren't putting in their data, knowing that they have the MAM group as a resource, and we'll keep trying to figure out how we resource with the smaller communities, because I think, we hear you loud and clear in terms of how can we get more of the data in both what's already in the ground that we just haven't accounted for some of those communities, and then the development piece. So I do think a letter, some kind of communication would be helpful that MAM could then share or directly with the communities.
And in addition to town hall meetings and town hall budget development, I also am cognizant of, it sounds like DES is doing a great program of doing some training that is fairly soon, so there's a timeliness there. But I want folks who, especially my friends Tom and from CLI, we want to encourage the quality data entry. So that point wasn't lost. I hear you, and we want to encourage inputting of data, but bad data being put in is almost worse than no data in some cases. So here you we'll make sure we're messaging in a way that's encouraging how we can do this and make sure that we're getting good quality data in there. On maybe we're capturing some activities that aren't being captured yet.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so we'll take that back and won't sit on it.
And we've talked a lot about PTAP data and data entry, but there's the monitoring piece of data that I think is also important, that MAM funds quite a bit of. And so that also is a piece that it's not a person, but I think it's important to keep all of the communities participating in that.
Yeah. Yep. No, it's good. And again, and I also don't want to lose track. Again, to the point I just made about, not wanting to go on, wanting to do a permit, find the right way to do it. It's a really good time for communities to look at, are there some, I don't want to, because it's all effort, and I get it, but even some low-hanging fruit activities under the structural and non-structural, So it is about capturing the great work that's already happening. It's also a good time to look at, are there some things we can do that, and the benefits that come from, like, because to the point of the 1,000 cuts, communities are dealing with, how do you prioritize? You have this many resources and you have this many things you can do. Totally get it. Just reinforcing the value add. First and foremost, the good environmental and public health outcomes that come out of the core mission, I know, of all of us in the room. But then also from a regulatory and oversight perspective, the benefits that will be for the communities in terms of how we can make progress on water quality in this watershed, but a way that's, quite frankly, more in the spirit of New Hampshire and northern New England of coming together and doing it because it makes sense for your communities versus you're being told to do it. So, so we're trying to strike that balance.
Excellent. All right, any other questions? Then I'll
You know,
turn-
other than thank you, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the discussion and appreciate being included today.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for coming and for giving us that update. Suzanne, did you want to talk about next steps?
I can but it doesn't necessarily need EPA and DES if they need to go.
No, I'm looking forward to,
Okay.
I mean, unless you're like, get out of here, we need to talk about stuff behind your back,
I'm just
but,
mindful,
I'm looking forward to, this first part of the conversation is very important, so looking
Great.
forward to hearing the rest of it.
Great. So what I have on the list is that we're gonna look to schedule a meeting sometime probably in, sounds like August.
Yeah,
Although we'll
August.
have to figure out so we don't interrupt everyone's vacation. To hear where Clifton and team, and I'm sure there'll be lots of meetings in between with Kala and his technical team, and probably DES before we get to that point, so that we have the kind of transparency that we're looking for as we roll out those, here's where we think what the data tells us and what might be the next steps, particularly important for our stakeholders. Second, we'll get some slides distributed, not only Jamie's slides and Clifton's slides and EPA slides. We'll get those all out to the members and everyone who's signed in today. I think we'll have to look at the list.
Yeah.
But if you don't get the slides, let us know if you're new here. Since it's a face or two, it's been new to me. Third, this is a reminder, if you have not done your intermunicipal agreement amendment, which is the renewal and update, please get that back to Gretchen or me. And if you need any help sort of putting together materials for your governing body, I'm happy to provide them. I've got a nice little blurb about what it is and why it's needed. So happy to put information together. I have Epping, I have Dover, Portsmouth did theirs on February 2nd. I have both Maine communities. And I feel like I have one more. But if you could get those to me, and again, happy to help with any materials. All right, I think that is it for next steps, unless any of you have anything else. Jamie, anyone raised a hand?
I'd say one other next step, I think offline, we will find a way to what John was talking about, is find a way to bring on the rest of the communities, the smaller communities. And I think we've already got some really great ideas, but that is the next step with the PTAP and the tracking. And then, just following our regular meeting layout, it goes to stakeholder comment. So feel free to use that as much as you want, or I don't know if you have.
I think Tom has laid out, CLF's primary issues in this context, but I would just add maybe that, in sort of to follow on to Ken's comments about communicating to communities who are not at this table, that what has been accomplished by this group in this type of collaboration is remarkable, without a doubt, being interstate, intermunicipal, interagency, and so on. And to just reinforce that in communications to the communities that are not here. This is not, the municipal coalition of yesterday. And that it is through this kind of collaboration that we are making the important strides in so many ways that we're seeing, and that we hope will continue. So I would just sort of underscore to the communities that we're concerned about sitting at this table, that it is the place to be.
Great, thank you, Melissa. Thank you for saying that. All right, public comment. Hopefully everyone's felt comfortable to speak. Then hearing none, with this, it will go to approval of November meeting minutes. And go ahead, Melissa, or Suzanne.
Yep, so I motion to approve the minutes with a minor amendment. We accidentally skipped Rollinsford in our list of members in the draft that got circulated. I think there was one small typo, which I forget where it was. That was the big issue though. Yeah. So I've made a motion to approve the minutes with a minor
There's
amendment.
Dennis with his second. Thank
as
you.
amended.
Thank you.
Minor.
All right. Any further comment? Then we will do, and you're gonna have to help me make sure I get everyone, but we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Rochester is a yes. Dover,
Yes.
yes. South Berwick,
Yeah.
who else do I have in the room?
Yes.
Oh, yes, gosh, I'm sorry. Ebbing, yes. Portsmouth,
Yes.
yes. And then I know we've got
Milton was on.
Milton.
Yes.
That's okay. Yes, excellent, thank you. And I know, who else was on there? Exeter, yep, and Berwick. Exeter and
Yes.
Berwick. Great,
Yes.
excellent.
Jay was there.
Yep.
Thanks,
he's
Jay.
in. Okay, and we heard Exeter, yes, so
All
unanimous,
right.
we're done.
Great, thank you so much. And
I would
schedule,
suggest we send out, rather than trying to do it in this large group. we can
Absolutely.
Send out some dates.
well, this was excellent. So motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I love it. All right, excellent. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the extra time.